the real impact you think Donald Trump's tariff measures could have on the global economy and most importantly on India's growth?
Well, I think they are a big source of uncertainty and a potential source of disruption for the rest of the world. For the US, I don't think they'll be as beneficial as the administration thinks, partly because, goods are made outside the US for a reason. It's cheaper to make it outside. Trying to bring them back into the US by putting up tariffs, typically if they could, they'd go somewhere else. What was being made in China will go to Vietnam. If you're going to put universal tariffs, maybe you stop them from coming in from elsewhere, but they have to be made in the US at a much higher cost because there's a reason China made it. I think the higher costs, the fact that the rest of the world is disrupted and their economies, which are already weaker than the US for the most part, weaken even further. And of course the great uncertainty about where do you invest when tariffs could change overnight, not just from the US, because remember there'll be retaliatory tariffs also. I think there's a big source of potential disruption in the world. I do think that the president has in mind three benefits. One, he believes it will even the playing field. The US is running deficits because everyone else cheats. The second is that this could be a source of revenue. And the third is this could be a source of jobs. We could question each one of these, especially the source of revenue, because it's actually small in relative to the US economy's size. Maybe 200, 300 billion you'll get over time every year if you set them. But of course, firms will also make changes themselves. In terms of whether they'll create jobs, I mean, a lot of manufacturing is already automated, even in a country like India. Bring it back to the US, it gets even more automated. So I'm not sure this is going to create a lot of jobs, especially at the high school educated level, which is where there's a lot of anxiety. So
there is the question of competitiveness, which you say the United States doesn't have, which is why these jobs moved outside. But then there is also the aspect of economic coercion. Might is right. Donald Trump wills it, and we're already seeing how corporate America is trying to kiss the ring, as it were. And therefore, does that then impact India's opportunity to be the China plus one gateway, whereas a lot of companies think, hey, Donald Trump is calling us, cajoling us, coercing us, so it's better to set up manufacturing in the United States than to look at countries like India?
I think it creates uncertainty because, one of the things that President Trump respects is the market. Mm-hmm. If the market starts tanking on the basis of, some preliminary set of tariffs, then clearly there will be a revisit to the tariff proposition.
How are the markets likely to react in your view?
I think if you said, suddenly after the markets had been expecting no or moderate tariffs, 60% tariffs on China, 25% on the rest of the world, it would be seriously adverse for the markets. I think that is partly why the decision has been postponed some. Of course, we heard today it may come on February 1st for Canada and Mexico. Also, the other concern is there's a lot of other stuff wrapped up in these tariffs, right? Remember when the BRICS countries were talking about an alternative payment system, there was a threat of tariffs if you do that. The threat of tariffs if you have too many drugs being produced in your country and sent across. If you have immigrants. I mean, at some point, the world is also going to get a little jaded. But of course, this is the most powerful country in the world. So you don't want to upset the president. You want to be on their right side. But how much can you do? So at some point, countries are also going to say the only thing they will listen to is the same kind of medicine. So you'll have tariffs imposed from the other side. Canada apparently has already prepared some. This is not going to end well if it continues along this path.
What kind of inflation pressures could it create on consumers in the United States and the spiral effect on consumers in India if these new tariffs are actually imposed?
Well, I think from the Indian perspective, it would be more limited because we don't import that much from the United States. And even if we impose tariffs on the US, that's not going to be a huge problem. I think the concern for India will be more if Chinese goods get stopped at the US border, will they try and find a home elsewhere? And similarly for Mexican goods and so on. I think on the US itself, tariffs will increase the price in the market. Some of it will be absorbed by the producer, but some of it will be passed on. If it is a one-time thing, I think the Fed will look through it because it's a one-time increase in prices. But if it's steady, if it creates more inefficiencies, that creates more inflation.